Chosen one, there is something you need to hear in this moment. Not later, when life feels easier, not after everything finally makes sense, but right here, exactly where you are. Whether you are sitting in a quiet room, lying awake with thoughts you cannot turn off, or carrying a heaviness you have learned to hide from everyone around you, this message is meeting you for a reason. The fight you have been living through has already reached its turning point. I am talking about the battle that followed you into the night, the one that sat beside you in silence and made you question how much longer you could keep going. There were mornings when you woke up exhausted before the day even began, and nights when you stared into the darkness wondering if anything was ever going to change. Chosen one, you made it through. Take a moment and let those words settle. You made it through. For so long, you were taught that peace had to be earned, that rest belonged to people who had already proven themselves, and that relief would arrive only after the struggle produced visible results. But heaven has never measured you by that standard. Chosen one, there is something many people never hear, and I believe you need to hear it now. God saw every part of the season you just walked through. God saw the prayers whispered into silence, the days when you kept showing up with a smile while carrying something nobody else in the room could see, and the moments when your strength felt thin, but you kept moving anyway. And the word spoken over that season was not disappointment. It was not correction. It was not another instruction to endure a little longer. The word was congratulations. That may sound simple at first, but there is more weight in it than most people realize. This is not praise for performance. This is recognition. It is the acknowledgement of a soul that remained faithful through a chapter that would have convinced many others to let go. You stayed present through a season that stopped making sense, and that kind of endurance changes a person from the inside. If something shifted in you as you heard that, pay attention to it. Maybe your chest feels a little lighter. Maybe there is a tension that loosened without you even realizing it was there. That feeling is deeper than emotion. It is the quiet part of you, recognizing a truth. It is carried all along, and finally allowing itself to believe it. This message is for you, chosen one. Not for everyone, not for the person casually passing by. It is for the one who fought a battle few people understood, the one who carried questions nobody could answer, and the one who is standing here now wondering what comes after survival. The fight is done. What comes next is what has been forming behind the scenes all along. Even while you were focused on making it through the day, something was being prepared for you beyond your sight. If this message feels like it found you at exactly the right moment, type "The fight is done" in the comments. Let those words become your first declaration as you step into this next season, because the deepest battle was never really about the circumstances. It was never only about the delays, the obstacles, the closed doors, or the people who misunderstood you. The hardest fight was happening underneath all of that. You were fighting to keep believing that you were still worthy of what God placed in your heart. You were fighting the voice that tried to convince you that silence meant abandonment, that delay meant rejection, and that the distance between where you are and where you hoped to be was proof that the promise had somehow slipped away. Maybe the most painful part was watching others move forward while you remained in a season that felt unmoving. Maybe you started wondering whether the dream was wrong or whether the problem was you. Maybe there were moments when even the title Chosen One felt difficult to believe, because your reality seemed to tell a different story. But listen carefully. The reason that battle felt so relentless was never because those voices were telling the truth. It felt relentless because you were closer than you realized. There is a pattern that appears again and again in the lives of chosen ones. I call it the pre-arrival storm. It is the season when resistance becomes most intense, not at the beginning of the journey and not in the middle, but in the final stretch before something shifts. The sky does not announce dawn with a single dramatic moment. It changes gradually until one day you realize the darkness no longer has the same hold it once did. In the same way, many chosen ones experience their greatest pressure just before the breakthrough they have been waiting for. You can see this pattern throughout Scripture and throughout the lives of people who have walked this road before you. The closer they came to what they were called to, the stronger the resistance seemed to become. The fight became harder because the destination was nearer than it appeared. And here you are, still standing, still listening, still here. I also know there are some chosen ones hearing these words who are struggling to receive them, not because you lack faith, but because disappointment has visited you so many times that hope itself began to feel risky. You learned to protect your heart by lowering your expectations before life could lower them for you. If that is where you are, I understand. I'm not asking you to force yourself into excitement. I'm simply asking you to stay open long enough to consider that there is a difference between comforting words and a true word, and something inside you already knows the difference. Now let us go deeper, because the fight did not begin where you think it did. Beneath the struggle, beneath the uncertainty, beneath every season of questioning, there was a wound quietly shaping the way you saw yourself. At some point, long before you had language for it, you began believing that your value depended on what you achieved. You learned to associate love with success, safety with productivity, and belonging with proving your worth. You may never have spoken those beliefs out loud, but they settled into your life all the same. This is what I call the worthiness wound, and for the chosen one, it becomes especially painful because your calling often grows inside you long before the evidence appears around you. While something sacred is being formed beneath the surface, the wound keeps asking for proof, asking for results, asking for visible confirmation that you belong where God has placed you. And this is what makes the wound so painful for the chosen one. When you carry something inside you that is bigger than your current circumstances can explain, when you sense a calling that has not yet taken visible form, the wound begins to speak into the silence. It compares your unseen process to other people's visible results. And it quietly convinces you that if nobody can see what is being built, then perhaps nothing is being built at all. For a long time you may have interpreted that struggle the wrong way. You may have called yourself lazy when you were actually discouraged. You may have questioned your discipline when the deeper issue was exhaustion. You may have wondered if something was wrong with your faith when, in reality, you were carrying a wound that kept pulling you away from fully trusting what was already growing inside you. Now that you can see it clearly, you can begin to understand how it operated. The worthiness wound has a subtle way of redirecting your energy. Instead of walking toward what God placed before you, you spend your strength trying to prove that you deserve to walk toward it in the first place. You explain yourself to people who were never meant to decide your value. You wait for permission from people who cannot see what has been placed inside you. You postpone your next step until someone else confirms what your spirit has already been whispering for years. And when that validation arrives too slowly, or never arrives at all, the wound grows louder. That is why the season felt so heavy. It was never only the obstacles in front of you. A great deal of your energy was being spent carrying an internal argument about your worth while trying to move forward at the same time. But chosen one, hear this carefully. Nothing you walked through was wasted, even the days when doubt felt stronger than confidence. Even the moments when you stood still because you no longer trusted your own voice. Even the seasons when the wound seemed louder than the calling, something meaningful was happening beneath the surface. You were being healed while you were being stretched. You were being prepared while you were being tested. What felt like delay was often deeper work, taking place where nobody could see it, including you. There is someone listening right now who has carried this wound for so long that it feels like part of their identity. You believe your tendency to overthink is simply who you are. You believe your need for reassurance is part of your personality. You believe the constant questioning is your nature, because it has been with you for so many years. But chosen one, I want to speak directly to that belief. That is not who you are. That is what happened to you. those are not the same thing. Beneath the wound is someone far deeper than the struggle ever allowed you to see. The sensitivity you once tried to hide became the source of your discernment. The loneliness you carried developed a depth of compassion that cannot be taught. The questions you wrestled with created wisdom that only comes from walking through difficult places and continuing anyway. The fire did not erase who you were. It revealed who you were becoming. The fight did not destroy you. It shaped you for what comes next. If you recognize yourself in these words, if the worthiness wound has been part of your story, type "I am built, not broken" in the comments. Let those words become a reminder of what this season has truly uncovered about you. Now let me show you where you are today. Not where you were 6 months ago, not where you were at the height of the battle, right now. There is a moment in every chosen one's journey that arrives quietly. It does not come with applause. It does not arrive with a dramatic announcement. It feels more like the turning of a tide, a shift beneath the water that nobody notices until everything begins moving in a different direction. Chosen one, that shift has already happened. You may still be looking around for evidence. You may still be waiting for circumstances to confirm what has changed, but the hardest part of the current has already passed. The resistance that felt relentless was the final surge before the movement began to reverse. You are standing at a threshold. The hard part is no longer ahead of you. The hard part is behind you. What does that mean in practical terms? It means the things that once felt impossible begin to lose some of their weight. The same challenges that used to drain you may still appear, but they no longer carry the same authority over your spirit because you are no longer standing in the same season that created them. It also means your sense of direction begins returning. During the storm, every option felt uncertain. Every choice felt risky. You questioned yourself so often that even simple decisions became exhausting. But when a storm starts to clear, clarity returns quietly. You begin knowing without wrestling for every answer, and something else changes. Your relationship with time begins to heal. There was a season when every delay felt personal, every closed door felt permanent. Every month that passed felt like proof that something had gone wrong. But now you are beginning to see time differently. You are beginning to understand that waiting was not empty space. It was fertile ground. The waiting was preparation. The waiting was cultivation. The waiting was creating roots before anything visible could rise above the surface. Most people around you never saw that process. They saw moments of silence. They saw distance. They saw exhaustion. They saw you withdraw and wondered what was wrong. What they could not see was the transformation happening beneath everything visible. God saw it. God saw every private victory, every moment you kept going when nobody applauded, every decision to remain faithful when it would have been easier to quit. And that work is complete. If something inside you has begun to open while listening to this, if a part of you feels lighter than it did a few minutes ago, then stay present. There is a reason these words found you today. Most people would have kept scrolling. You stayed. And maybe that is because a part of you already knows that this message is not simply about surviving what happened. It is about understanding it well enough that you do not carry the old patterns into the new season. Because the fight may be over, but wisdom comes from recognizing what the fight was trying to teach you, and that understanding will help you walk forward without rebuilding the very walls you were meant to leave behind. There is something about breakthrough that very few people talk about. Chosen one. Most people spend so much time focusing on how to survive the battle that they never prepare for what happens after it. And sometimes the most overlooked danger is not what comes against you next. It is what the fight leaves behind inside you. When the season of pressure finally ends, the habits that helped you survive do not disappear overnight. The tendency to expect disappointment, the instinct to pull away before someone can hurt you, the habit of lowering your expectations so life cannot crush them again. Those patterns often remain long after the battle itself has passed. The season changes, but the body and mind may still be living as if the fight is happening. I call this the soldier's return. Anyone who has lived through a prolonged struggle understands it. The danger leaves, but the nervous system keeps standing guard. The storm moves on, yet something inside remains braced for another wave. The chosen one experiences this in a deeply personal way. You spend so much time scanning for what could go wrong that peace itself begins to feel unfamiliar. You become so accustomed to carrying weight that setting it down almost feels unsafe. And if this pattern goes unnoticed, it follows you into the next season. You begin questioning blessings that were meant to be received. You hesitate when opportunities appear because past disappointments taught you to expect hidden costs. You hold relationships at arm's length because part of you is still trying to protect wounds that are already healing. But hear me clearly, chosen one. The fight shaped you, but it does not own you. The season taught you many things, but it does not get to define the way you move forward. Every new season requires a shift, and the shift before you now is simpler than it sounds. It is the movement from fighting to receiving. Those are two very different postures, even though many people mistake them for the same thing. The fighter survives by holding tight. The fighter braces, endures, and carries. The receiver opens. The receiver trusts. The receiver creates space for something new to arrive. You have fought long enough. You have carried enough. And perhaps what feels unfamiliar now is not struggle, but the possibility that you no longer need to struggle in the same way. For many chosen ones, receiving is harder than fighting ever was. Fighting gave you a role. It gave you something to do with the restless energy inside you. It gave you a problem to solve and an obstacle to overcome. Receiving asks something different. It asks you to believe that goodness can reach you without being earned through exhaustion. It asks you to believe that every blessing does not need to be purchased through suffering, and for someone carrying the worthiness wound, that can feel deeply uncomfortable. But receiving is not passivity. Receiving is alignment. It is allowing yourself to stand where what has been moving toward you can finally arrive. It is trusting that what God has been preparing does not require you to force every door open with your own hands. The first part of this posture is releasing the story your circumstances have been telling you. The last season had conditions attached to it. There were delays, disappointments, uncertainties, and unanswered questions. Those circumstances were real, but they were never your identity. The battle described your environment. It never defined your value. The second part is learning to open again. Not just emotionally, but physically. The body stores stories. It remembers seasons of vigilance. It remembers the nights spent waiting for the next problem, and the mornings that began with heaviness before the day even started. Take a moment right now and notice your shoulders. Notice your jaw. Notice whether there is tension hiding in places you have stopped paying attention to. Take a slow breath and allow yourself to soften. Let your body hear the same truth. Your spirit has been trying to tell you, the fight is over. Sometimes healing begins when the body finally receives the news that the battle has ended. And the third part of receiving is speaking differently about where you are. Not from fear, not from survival, but from truth. The language of a new season begins long before the visible evidence catches up. If something shifted inside you while reading this, if you felt your body release something it has been carrying for longer than you realized, comment "release" below. Let that be your way of marking the moment when your body and spirit finally agree. Now I want to speak directly to the chosen one who survived the fire, but is quietly wondering whether there is anything to show for it. You held on through the hardest part. You stayed when walking away would have been easier. And yet when you look around, the visible evidence still seems incomplete. Maybe the finances still resemble the old season. Maybe the relationships still carry unresolved weight. Maybe the calling inside you feels stronger than ever, but the outer world has not caught up to what changed within you. And that gap can become dangerous if you misunderstand it. There is often a period where the inner transformation arrives before the outer confirmation. During that time, a voice begins whispering familiar questions. Was the change real? Did anything actually happen? Am I only imagining progress because I want it so badly? Chosen one. That voice appears at one of the most important moments of the journey, not because it is speaking truth, but because it is speaking from old patterns that have not yet realized the season has changed. A seed does not become visible the moment it begins growing. The deepest changes happen beneath the surface first. Roots form in darkness before anyone sees evidence above the ground. The same is true of transformation. What shifted inside you is real. The strength that was built is real. The healing that began is real. The clarity that has been forming is real. External evidence simply takes time to catch up with internal reality. Stop measuring your progress only by what can be counted, displayed, or explained. The chosen one who has survived a long and costly season does not need immediate proof in order to trust what has already changed. The fight is over because it is over. The evidence is still arriving. Walk forward while it arrives. And chosen one, the fact that you are still here matters more than you realize. Most people move on the moment a message asked for deeper reflection, but you stayed. There is something sacred about that kind of attention. It belongs to someone who is no longer looking for temporary inspiration, but is becoming ready to receive what the next season is trying to reveal. Stay with me for a moment, chosen one, because there is something important you need to understand about the season you just survived. Every battle produces something. Every season leaves something behind. Nothing you walk through was empty, and nothing was wasted. Even the parts that seemed painful, confusing, or unfair while you were living through them. The real question is whether you recognize what was built inside you, because if you do not recognize what was formed during the storm, you may overlook the very thing that was meant to serve you in the season ahead. Sometimes the greatest gifts arrive disguised as scars, and the chosen one often discovers their deepest strengths only after the fire has passed. The first gift is authority, not authority that comes from a title, a platform, or the approval of other people. This is the kind of authority that settles into a person after they've walked through something difficult and come out carrying wisdom instead of bitterness. When you speak from that place, people feel it, even when they cannot explain why. There is a certain weight behind the words of someone who has lived what they are talking about. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be imitated. It is earned in quiet places where nobody is watching, and that is exactly the kind of authority this season has been building in you. The second gift is discernment. You see things now that you could not see before. Patterns reveal themselves more quickly. Motives become easier to recognize. You notice the difference between what is genuine and what is merely convincing. That is not cynicism, chosen one. It is wisdom born from experience. The storm taught you how to listen beneath appearances. It taught you how to recognize what aligns with your spirit and what quietly drains it. That discernment will protect you in the season ahead, and it will help guide the people whose lives eventually intersect with yours. The third gift is compassion. You now understand what it feels like to carry a burden nobody else can fully see. You know what it is like to smile through exhaustion, to keep showing up when your heart feels tired, and to continue walking when nobody understands how much effort it takes just to keep moving. Because of that, you can sit beside someone else's pain differently. You do not need perfect words. You do not need solutions. Your presence alone carries understanding. And sometimes understanding heals more deeply than advice ever could. Chosen one, you are not the same person who entered this season. Something in you has changed. You are deeper than you were, wiser than you were, stronger in ways that cannot always be measured from the outside. And what you carry now is exactly what the next chapter of your life requires. But there is another truth we need to talk about. Many chosen ones arrive at the end of a difficult season and wonder why they still feel a gap between what they know and what they are able to do. They can sense the calling. They can feel the change, Yet somehow it seems difficult to translate that inner knowing into consistent movement. If that sounds familiar, do not mistake it for failure. Do not turn it into another accusation against yourself. Sometimes the mind and heart need time to catch up with everything they have been carrying. Long seasons of struggle create fatigue that goes deeper than most people realize. There are chosen ones who have spent so much time surviving that they have forgotten what it feels like to move freely. They know where they want to go, but part of them is still recovering from where they have been. They are no longer fighting the old battle, yet they are still learning how to trust life beyond it. Maybe that is where you are right now. Maybe you can feel the shift happening inside you, but the clarity comes in waves. Maybe there are days when you sense exactly where you are headed, and other days when the path feels distant again. That does not mean something is wrong. Healing is often quieter than breakthrough. Restoration is often gentler than the battle that made it necessary. A field does not become fertile overnight after a storm. The ground needs time to settle before new growth appears. What matters now is not forcing yourself forward. What matters is allowing every part of you to come into agreement with what your spirit already knows. The season has changed. The fight has ended. The person you are becoming throughout all of it is beginning to emerge, and perhaps that is the deeper invitation of this moment. Chosen one, not to strive harder, not to prove more, not to search endlessly for what is missing, but to recognize what has already been restored, what has already been healed, and what is already awakening inside you. Because the next season is not asking you to become someone else. It is inviting you to fully become the person you are being shaped into all along. Chosen one, the season you just walked through produced far more in you than you may realize. It strengthened your authority, sharpened your discernment, and deepened your compassion in ways that could only be forged through experience. It taught you how to keep moving when the path disappeared, and how to hold on to a promise when visible evidence was scarce. Now you stand at the edge of a new season, carrying gifts that were formed in places few people will ever fully understand. What many chosen ones struggle with at this stage is not a lack of purpose or calling. It is the lingering weight of everything they carried while becoming who they are now. There can be a strange gap between knowing something has changed inside you and fully living from that change every day. That gap does not mean something is wrong. It simply means healing is still catching up with transformation. Maybe you have felt that tension yourself. Some days clarity feels undeniable, and other days old fears try to reclaim familiar ground. You know the fight changed you, yet part of you is still learning to trust the person who emerged from it. Long seasons of endurance leave impressions behind, and releasing those impressions is part of crossing into what comes next. There is something deeper I want you to see. During the battle, you told yourself stories that helped you survive. You reminded yourself to hold on one more day, to trust that the waiting had meaning, and to believe that the season would eventually pass. Those stories carried you through darkness, and they served a sacred purpose. But chosen one, the story that helps you survive, is not always the story that helps you arrive. There comes a moment when the language of endurance gives way to the language of becoming. The conversation inside you begins to change because your spirit no longer needs to live as though everything depends on surviving the next storm. The storm is no longer the center of the story you are, and so is the life beginning to unfold because of everything you learned. For so long, your inner dialogue may have been focused on simply making it through. You endured, waited, and protected what felt fragile. But the season ahead asks different questions. What will you build? What will you create? And what will you finally allow yourself to receive, now that your energy is no longer consumed by survival? The chosen one who continues telling survival stories while standing in a season of arrival often feels divided inside. One part is reaching toward the future, while another part is still looking over its shoulder at the past. One part is ready to receive, while another part remains prepared for loss. But your life is asking for integration now. The old season taught you endurance. But the new season is teaching you trust. The old season taught you how to hold on, while the new season is teaching you how to open your hands. The old season taught you how to survive uncertainty, but the new season is teaching you how to live from what you already know. Perhaps that is why you are still here listening. You are not here because you needed another motivational message. You are here because something inside you recognizes that you are standing at an important threshold. There is a reason this season feels quieter, steadier, and more settled than the ones before it. Something that once demanded all of your attention has completed its work. The fight is over, not because every circumstance has changed, but because the person being formed through the fight has emerged. The greatest evidence is not outside of you yet. It is within you. Something has finished, and something new is ready to begin. Think about the people who walked difficult roads before you. They understand what it costs to remain faithful when progress is invisible and promises seem distant. If they could speak to you now, they would not ask whether you survived, because they already know you did. The real question would be who you became because you survived. They would ask whether you trust what was built in you. They would ask whether you are ready to walk forward as the person the fire revealed. Your attention belongs there now, not on what was lost, how long it took, or every scar left behind. It belongs on what remains, what was strengthened, and what is finally ready. Chosen one, what you carry now is exactly what this season requires. The fight is over, you made it through, and the very things you thought were breaking you were quietly preparing you for this moment. If these words resonate with your spirit, type "I am at the threshold" in the comments. Let that declaration mark the line between the season that shaped you and the season that is now ready to receive you. Chosen one, before we go further, I want to take you somewhere for a moment. Not into fantasy, but into a future that is already beginning to take shape because of everything you have walked through. Sometimes you need to see where the road is leading before you fully understand why it was worth traveling. So picture a morning 6 months from now. You wait before the alarm, and for the first time in a long time, the tension that used to greet you every morning is gone. The pressure you carried so long that it became familiar has been replaced by something steadier. Not excitement or euphoria, but peace. The kind of peace that arrives when a question you carried for years no longer needs an answer. As you lie there, your first thought is different. You are no longer scanning for problems or preparing for disappointment before the day begins. Instead, a gentler question rises within you. What is mine to build today? That version of you is real, chosen one. Not because it exists somewhere far away, but because it is already being formed through the choices you are making now. The person who wakes with that kind of peace is the same person this season has been shaping all along. The distance between you and that future is smaller than it appears. That distance is not measured primarily in time. It is measured in perspective, in the decision to stop fighting battles that have already ended and to receive what your spirit has carried for so long. Yet I know there may be resistance inside you, even now. A voice may be saying you have heard words like these before. Perhaps disappointment has taught you caution. Perhaps promises took longer than expected, and hope became difficult to trust. If that voice is present, I understand it, but disappointment does not automatically invalidate the truth. Many chosen ones have carried a promise long before they carried proof. They felt the shift before they saw the evidence, and that gap tested them deeply, yet the gap was never proof that the promise was false. A seed begins growing beneath the surface long before anyone can see what is happening above the ground. And perhaps that is where you are now. The calling is real, the growth is real, and the transformation is real. The fact that your circumstances have not fully reflected it yet does not diminish what has already happened within you. The visible world is simply catching up. There is another voice I want to address. It is the voice that whispers this message belongs to someone else, someone stronger, more deserving, or more qualified. That voice has been wrong about you for a very long time. The worthiness wound always tries to convince people that everyone else qualifies except them. But grace was never built on performance. Your value was never established by achievements, and your place in this story was never dependent on perfection. You are not the exception to this message. You are one of the reasons it exists. This season reveals who you truly are. Beneath everything the fight required you to become, you are not merely a fighter, even though you proved you could fight. You are not merely a survivor, even though you survived what would have stopped many others. You are a builder. The wisdom developed through silence, the discernment sharpened through waiting, and the compassion born through suffering are not consolation prizes. They are tools. They are materials. They are part of what you will build with next. That is why the season mattered. The fire was preparing the builder. The waiting was preparing the builder. The silence was preparing the builder. There are moments in life when preparation and opportunity finally meet. They arrive quietly, without fanfare, but they carry a deep sense of recognition. Something inside you simply knows that what has been prepared for is finally ready. Chosen one. This is that kind of moment. The months and years of struggle may have felt endless while you were living them. Yet what defines a moment like this is not how much time passed, but the readiness created through everything that passed. And readiness is exactly what this season has been producing in you. Before this message comes to a close, there is one final truth I want to place before you, not as motivation alone, but as a recognition of something that remained true throughout every moment of the battle. Stay with me, chosen one, because what comes next is not a new truth. It is the truth you have been preparing to fully receive. Before we come to the final part of this message, chosen one, there is one more pattern I want to place in your hands. It often appears after a long season of struggle, yet many people miss it because it arrives so quietly. I call it the gentle migration. It is the subtle movement from one way of being into another, happening so gradually that you often recognize it only when you look back and realize how much has changed. During this season, you may notice a different kind of waiting. It is no longer the anxious waiting of the battle, filled with urgency and unanswered questions. Instead, it feels more like standing at dawn before the sun rises, sensing that something is approaching without needing to force it into view. There is a softness to it, a steadiness that feels unfamiliar at first. You may also notice that things you once struggled to make happen begin finding their own path. Conversations arrive naturally, opportunities appear with less effort, and situations that seemed frozen begin to move. Because these changes happen quietly, you may be tempted to dismiss them, but the gentle migration often looks ordinary while it is unfolding. Beneath the surface, life is beginning to respond to the transformation that already happened within you. This is not a season for forcing outcomes, chosen one. It is a season for remaining open, continuing the practices that sustained you during the fight, and paying attention to what arrives with peace rather than pressure. The opportunities of this season often feel different because they carry a sense of rightness instead of constant resistance. Something inside you relaxes rather than braces. You may notice this shift in your relationships as well. Some people who occupied significant space during the battle may naturally drift away because their role in that chapter has been completed. At the same time, new people may appear whose presence feels lighter, clearer, and more aligned with who you are becoming. Trust your discernment during this time, because the fight sharpened it for a reason. There is also a unique kind of celebration that follows the completion of a difficult season. It is not always excitement or overwhelming emotion. More often, it arrives as peace, as a settling, as the realization that something which carried weight for years no longer holds the same power over you. That quiet shift is often how a new season introduces itself. Before we move into the final declaration, I want to invite you into a brief moment of receiving. If you are somewhere safe, close your eyes, or simply soften your gaze and become present. Bring your attention to your chest and think of one moment from the fight that cost you deeply. One moment you survived, even when you doubted you could. Acknowledge that moment without reliving it. You carried that weight. You paid that cost. and you made it through. Now allow yourself to set it down. Take a slow breath and create space for something new to arrive, whether it is peace, clarity, strength, or hope. Chosen one, what arrives in that space matters. The room you just created was waiting to be filled by something other than survival. Open your eyes and remember this: you are still here, the fight is behind you, and the new season has already begun. If something shifted inside you, type "received" in the comments, and let that be your first act of agreement with what is unfolding. Now let me speak the truth this entire message has been moving toward. You are not who the fight tried to convince you that you were. You are not the fear, the exhaustion, the disappointment, or the voice that questioned whether you would make it. You are the person who kept going, who remained, and who endured a process that expanded what you are capable of carrying. When metal passes through fire, it remains the same material, but it leaves stronger than before. It can withstand more, carry more, and become more because of the refining. The same is true of you. You entered this season carrying a calling, and you leave it carrying the capacity to walk in that calling. The fight did not reveal your weakness. It revealed your substance, your resilience, and the strength that existed beneath the doubt and waiting. So receive this now. Chosen one, you are not late, you are not behind, and you have not been diminished by what you endured. You have been expanded by it. You are not someone who almost made it. You are someone who made it through. God's congratulations is not offered because you performed perfectly, but because you carried a promise through conditions that could have convinced you to abandon it. You remained present through uncertainty, held on through silence, and kept walking when evidence was scarce. There is a chosen one listening right now who needed to hear that. Somewhere along the way, you began measuring yourself by what did not happen, by missed opportunities, failed attempts, and plans that never unfolded the way you expected. Without realizing it, you allowed those moments to become evidence against yourself. But those moments were never the verdict. A difficult battle does not determine the outcome of the war, and a season of delay does not cancel a calling. The war is won. You made it through, and it is time to stop carrying old losses as though they still have authority over your future. So let us mark this threshold together. I release every accusation that followed you through the fight, every voice that said you were not enough, and every circumstance that seemed to confirm those fears. Those voices do not belong in the season you are entering because they only borrowed authority from your pain. That season is complete. I release the pressure of artificial timelines, the fear that you are running out of time, and the anxiety that life was moving ahead without you. What is meant for you is not measured by panic or controlled by fear. There is an appointed rhythm to your journey, and what belongs to you has not forgotten your name. I release the smaller version of yourself that survival required, the version that expected less, dreamed less boldly, and lowered its hopes simply to avoid disappointment. You can honor that version for carrying you through a difficult chapter, but it is not the version that enters the next one. I release the loneliness of the hidden battle, the nights nobody knew about, the prayers nobody heard, and the burdens you carried in silence. You were seen, you were witnessed, and you were never as alone as you felt. The season ahead carries connection, alignment, and the arrival of people who recognize what has been formed within you. Chosen one, you are the cycle breaker. You are the one who kept walking when stopping would have made perfect sense. The wisdom you carry has weight because it was earned through real struggles and real endurance. The authority, depth, and compassion you carry were formed through experience, and that matters. This season of completion is not the ending of your story. It is the moment you finally understand what every lesson, every delay, and every unanswered question was preparing you for. Everything led here. Every step brought you closer to this realization. You made it through, and you are not going back. Not because challenges will never come again, but because you now know who you are, what you carry, and what survived the fire. Once that knowledge becomes part of you, There is no returning to the version of yourself that believed the fight had the final word. If you are still here, type "I will never go back" in the comments. Let those words become a marker, a line between the season of survival and the season of becoming. Let them remind you that the person who entered the fight is not the same person leaving it. And to every chosen one who stayed until this moment, thank you. What you carry now is more valuable than anything the struggle tried to take from you. The authority is real. The discernment is real. The healing is real. The calling is real. And the new season is real. Walk forward with open hands, receive what is ready to arrive, and build what you are always being prepared to build. Chosen one, you are no longer waiting to become who you were meant to be. You are standing in the doorway of it now. You are ready, you are whole, and you are complete. And so it is.